The Marauders started as one of Harry Potter universe's closest friend groups and ended in 4 very different places. One became a legend, one became a hero, one became a rat, literally, and one spent most of his life being punished for something that happened to him when he was 4 years old. Let's start with Remus Lupin. He was born on the 10th of March 1960 to Lyle Lupin and Hope Howell. His father worked for the ministry and once publicly insulted Fenrir Greyback during a hearing, calling him nothing more than a savage beast with no human feeling left. The insult was accurate and extremely unwise. Greyback bit Lyle's young son shortly before his 5th birthday as revenge, making him the only dark wizard in history to respond to a bad performance review by biting someone's child. From that point, nearly everything in Remus's life was shaped by something done to him before he was old enough to understand it. Most families assumed Hogwarts was out of the question for someone like him. Dumbledore's response was to install a violent tree and call it a solution. He personally arranged for Remus to attend, and the Whomping Willow, that violently aggressive tree on the school's front lawn, was actually part of the plan. Dumbledore had it planted to conceal a hidden tunnel running beneath the grounds to an empty house in Hogsmeade called the Shrieking Shack. So, once a month, Remus disappeared through it before his transformation. The locals heard the noises, decided the place was haunted, and apparently found that more plausible than asking a follow-up question. Dumbledore built a werewolf door, told no one, and called it a day. James and Sirius guessed the truth in their 2nd year, and Peter soon became part of the secret too. The 3 of them responded with the kind of plan only a 16-year-old would think was reasonable: the Animagus Project. Basically teaching themselves illegal animal transformation in secret over 3 years, just so Remus would have company during the worst night of his month. It took 3 years, but they were successful. James can now turn into a stag, Peter a rat, Sirius a large black dog. They gave themselves nicknames: Prongs, Padfoot, Wormtail, and Moony, after the one detail about Remus that had shaped everything else. They called themselves the Marauders, which is the name 4 teenage boys gave themselves when they decided that systematically breaking every rule in a 700-year-old castle was a group activity worth branding. They also built the Marauders map, but we'll talk about that during James Potter's chapter because he had a major influence on this creation. Remus was the most thoughtful of the 4, and the one who saw things most clearly. He knew when James and Sirius crossed a line. He knew the group had a dangerous edge that nobody was properly managing. Most of the time, he let it go. He had waited his whole life for friends who would not leave him because of what he was, and he was not about to risk that by becoming the person who told them off. So he stayed quiet, and that pattern stayed with him long after school ended. It did not serve him well when the war came. During the First Wizarding War, paranoia quietly corroded old friendships. Sirius began to suspect Remus was the spy. He was not. The actual spy was sitting at the table with them the whole time. The years after were defined by anti-werewolf prejudice that made steady work almost impossible, a pattern that repeated enough times to stop feeling like bad luck and start feeling like weather. In Harry's 3rd year, Dumbledore brought him back to teach defense against the dark arts, and he was the best Harry had had in that role across all 7 years, which is partly a testament to Remus and partly a fairly damning review of the 6 other people who held the job. It lasted 1 year before Snape told the students what he really was. Thanks a lot, Snape. After Voldemort's return, the Order sent Remus into werewolf communities to stop them joining Voldemort's side. It was during this period that he met Nymphadora Tonks and they fell in love, which Remus immediately decided was a burden he needed to spare her from. When Tonks became pregnant, fear got the better of him and he walked away. Harry told him he was being a coward. He was right. Remus went back and he died fighting in the Battle of Hogwarts on the 2nd of May 1998, alongside Tonks, with their son Teddy only weeks old. He paid the heaviest price of all 4 Marauders simply for existing, and he paid it without bitterness, without complaint, and without ever stopping being exactly the person his friends had always believed he was. His best friend Sirius Black had a rather different problem, where Remus spent his life being punished for something done to him. Sirius spent his being punished for something he did not do at all, which required a very specific kind of institutional failure, and the British wizarding establishment delivered it without breaking a sweat. Sirius Black. Sirius Black was born on the 3rd of November 1959 into one of the oldest pureblood wizarding families in Britain. which sounds impressive until you understand what that family was actually like. His parents, Orion and Walburga Black, were both committed pure-blood supremacists, and the house at Grimmauld Place had a tapestry covering an entire wall showing the family tree, with scorch marks where the embarrassing relatives used to be. In most families, you just stop inviting someone to Christmas. The Blacks preferred fire. And a very on-brand Sirius move is that almost every Black before him had gone into Slytherin. So Sirius went into Gryffindor, and yeah, his family treated it like an actual crime. He moved out at 16 and went to live with the Potters, who were warm, generous, and completely unbothered by the arrival of a runaway with a famous surname and nowhere else to go. Sirius later said they sort of adopted him as a second son, and for someone who had grown up in that house, that was not a small thing. What Sirius brought to the Marauders was brilliance, recklessness, and absolutely catastrophic judgment that ran like a fault line through everything he did. The Animagus project was largely driven by him. When they succeeded, Sirius became a large black dog, which suited him so completely it almost seemed unfair. But there was a darker side the better stories skip over. In 5th year, he told Snape exactly how to get past the Whomping Willow, knowing what was waiting at the other end. James intervened before anyone was killed. When it was over, Sirius was not particularly sorry. He despised Snape. He was convinced Snape was going to get them caught, and he had not fully thought through what a werewolf actually does to a person. After Hogwarts, he joined the Order, but the war was quietly corroding old friendships from the inside. By the time James and Lily went into hiding, trust between people who had once seemed unbreakable had already cracked. Sirius was meant to be their secret keeper, and at the last minute switched the role to Peter, convinced Voldemort would never waste time on someone so forgettable. What he did not know was that Peter had been Voldemort's spy for over a year. Surprise! The most forgettable friend turned out to be the most dangerous one. He handed over the location within about a week, and James and Lily were dead not long after. When Sirius tracked Peter down, Peter screamed in a crowded street that Sirius had betrayed the Potters, blew up the road, killed 12 muggles, cut off his own finger, and vanished into rat form. Sirius was left in the wreckage laughing because the alternative was screaming, and the screaming felt like it would never stop. The Ministry interpreted the laughing as guilt and sent him to Azkaban without a trial, which remains one of the more impressive feats of institutionalized wrongness in the entire series. He spent 12 years there, surviving by retreating into his dog form since a dog's mind gave the Dementors far less to work with. What kept him going was knowing he was innocent, a fact most long-term Azkaban prisoners eventually lose hold of. He also held on to his anger, which in Azkaban passed for hope. He escaped in 1993 after spotting Peter Pettigrew alive in a Daily Prophet photo of the Weasley family. He made his way back to Hogwarts and got Peter cornered in the Shrieking Shack, but the chaos of that night let Peter slip away before anyone could stop him. Sirius was recaptured and left in a tower waiting for the Dementor's kiss, until Harry and Hermione went back in time with a time turner and broke him out. He left on Buckbeak, still wanted, his name still not cleared. The last chapter for Sirius was Grimmauld Place, offered up as Order headquarters and serving as a punishment nobody had officially handed down. Trapped inside, unable to leave, surrounded by his family's portraits and his dead mother's screaming likeness. There are many ways to go to war, but Sirius got the one where you sit in your childhood home and wait for news. So yeah, he became reckless in a new way, not the carelessness of school, but the momentum of someone who had stopped calculating the cost of anything. When Harry went to the Department of Mysteries, Sirius came to fight, and Bellatrix Lestrange hit him with a curse that sent him backwards through the veil hanging from the archway. No trial, name never cleared. The family tapestry had blasted his name off years before, and in the end, he did not seem to have missed it at all. Now, the third Marauder never went to Azkaban, never spent years in hiding, and never had his name dragged through the wizarding press. He just had 21 years, which turned out to be all he got. James Potter. James Potter, the father of you-know-who that's not you-know-who. You know, the boy who lived. He was born on the 27th of March 1960, the only child of Fleamont and Euphemia Potter. His father made the family fortune inventing Sleekeazy's hair potion, which is either an impressive legacy or a very funny one depending on how seriously you take hair care. The Potters were warm, comfortable, and completely uninterested in pure-blood ideology. James grew up loved, probably never told no very often, and very aware of both. It shows. He arrived at Hogwarts already the kind of person other people noticed, talented across most areas of magic, and a standout Quidditch player for Gryffindor. He also carried something nobody else in the group had, the invisibility cloak, one of the 3 Deathly Hallows, an artifact of near mythical rarity that had been in the Potter family for generations. He owned one of the most powerful magical objects in existence, Animagus, and his primary use for it during school was sneaking around a castle at night, which is roughly equivalent to using the Sword of Gryffindor to cut your birthday cake. And that's where the map comes in. James used the cloak to move through the castle unseen for years, which meant by the time the four of them sat down to build the Marauders map, they had explored more of Hogwarts than most students ever would. Every secret passage, every hidden route, every corner that teachers did not know about. To make it work, they used the homunculus charm, a complex piece of magic that tracked every person in the castle by name in real time. And the whole project had grown out of the life that they had built around Remus. So, its most practical use was exactly that, helping him move through the castle during his worst months without anyone finding out why. Now, we know James' Animagus form was a stag, which also happened to be his Patronus, earning him the nickname Prongs, and Lily's Patronus was a doe, which makes sense if you know anything about those two. But what is genuinely weird is that Snape's Patronus was also a doe, the same shape as Lily's, always. Speaking of Snape, in 5th year Harry watched from the pensive as James and Sirius cornered Snape in front of a crowd and hung him upside down by his ankle for no reason except that they could. Yes, he was a bully, and Lily told him exactly what she thought, repeatedly, clearly, and at length. It eventually got through, which says as much about her patience as it does about his capacity to change. By 6th or 7th year, something had shifted. He stopped hexing people for sport, started behaving like someone worth being around, and Lily noticed. They joined the Order together after school, defied Voldemort directly on 3 separate occasions, and went into hiding when Voldemort set his sights on Harry. James died at Godric's Hollow on the 31st of October 1981, wandless, going to face Voldemort anyway because it was the only way to buy his family time. He did not make it, but the fact that he walked toward it without his wand knowing exactly what was coming matters more than most things said about him. He was 21 years old, and in those 21 years he had managed to be a bully, a devoted friend, a husband, a father, and someone willing to walk unarmed toward Voldemort. Most people do not fit that many versions of themselves into an entire lifetime, let alone 21 years. Peter Pettigrew. We never knew about Peter's birth date or who his parents are, although some say his parents had a cheese store. What we do know is that Peter ended up in Gryffindor and attached himself to the group immediately, not because he matched them in talent or confidence, but because being near more admired people was as close to that as he could get. And for a long time, proximity was enough. He was easily frightened, easily led, and not comfortable standing alone. He managed the Animagus transformation, and his form was a rat, giving him the nickname Wormtail, in a piece of accidental foreshadowing the universe should probably be embarrassed about. He was part of everything the Marauders built, including the map, and he benefited from the group's protection in ways the others never needed to think about. He was never quite an equal, and that gap quietly became something he never said out loud and never let go of. When Voldemort rose, Peter calculated that he was going to win and reached out to offer what he knew from inside the Order, selling out people who would have protected him without question. Fear had always driven him more than anything else, and fear had just made the biggest decision of his life. He turned into a rat, somehow found his way into the Weasley household, and spent the next 12 years being passed between children like a hand-me-down. Percy had him first, then Ron. The most dangerous traitor in the wizarding world was living in a 9-year-old's pocket. He eventually found Voldemort, helped him rebuild, killed Cedric Diggory on his orders, and restored Voldemort's body with a ritual that looked disturbingly like someone following a cursed cooking show recipe. So yes, he was a rat, and apparently he could cook. At that point, the only thing missing was a Pixar contract. After Peter forgot to add Tom Riddle's nose to the recipe, he gave him a silver hand as a reward. At Malfoy Manor, when Peter hesitated after Harry invoked the life debt between them, that hand, which answered to Voldemort rather than Peter, registered the hesitation as disloyalty and turned on him. It was the most cursed thank you gift in the history of dark magic, and it killed him. He died alone, destroyed by a gift from the man he had given everything to serve. So yeah, James died protecting his family. Sirius died with his name still stained by a crime he never committed. Remus died fighting for a world that had spent most of his life rejecting him. And Peter died the way he had lived, ruled by fear to the very end. Speaking of the end, what happened to every wizard after the Deathly Hallows? That's your next lesson here at Stickman Hogwarts. Watch it now before Snape catches you sneaking through Hogwarts.